From Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. I'm Mark Summers, and now, here's your host, Dan Harary.
Drop the slide. Let's bring in Michael Ian Black.
Hello.
Hello. I'm sorry. I understand you have a cold. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm a little under the weather, so I'm reporting for duty from my sickbed this evening.
Okay. You're a real trooper. The show must go on, as they always say in show business.
Indeed.
So thank you for doing this for my dopey show. I really appreciate it. You and I have been emailing for about a year, so it's really nice to finally meet you face to face, sort of.
And you.
Thanks. So I have some questions, and we'll just run through this until the bitter end here. Mm-hmm. Michael, so where did I always ask my guests the first questions? Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? And what kind of interest did you have as a kid?
So, like you, I grew up in New Jersey. My mother worked a lot of her career for the Social Security Administration. Later, she opened a card and stationery store. My father was a kind of mid-level executive at AT&T. And what was the thing? What were my interests?
What town? I know you grew up in New Jersey. What town was it?
Hillsborough. It's a township in south central New Jersey.
South Central. Okay. I thought you were up northern, but you weren't. What kind of interest did you have as a kid?
Well, as a kid, I was very into baseball, and then I got into theater. I was always a big reader, a writer, played, neighborhood sports, fairly regular kid.
Were you into rock music at all?
No, actually, not until.
Interesting.
I went from being into like 80s pop music when I was like a young teenager, and then immediately when my junior and senior year of high school transitioned into like hardcore punk. So there was never like a rock and roll sort of middle ground for me until later in my life.
Interesting. Well, I'm older than you. I'm 68, and for me, it was the Beatles. And the Beatles for a while. When I was, 7, 8, 9, it was the Beatles. But then when I was 10, Michael, the Monkees came on TV. And really, I'm seriously. And for me, and quick story, me personally, the Monkees came on. I was 10. I was a classical pianist at that time for years. I hated it. And the Monkees came. I fell in love with Mickey Dolenz. Mm-hmm. And I got up from the first episode of the Monkees, true story. I went to my parents. I said, Mom, Dad, I'm a drummer now. And they said, yeah, right. Yeah, sure. I go, no, you don't understand. I'm a drummer now. And I hucked them, Michael, for years. They got me a drum set a year before my bar mitzvah. And I've been a drummer since 1958. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I see the electronic drums behind you. And I know your dad gave you that tiny drum set way over your right shoulder.
That's exactly right. And my Ludwig bass drum, if you can see it.
Oh, yeah. I see it.
Oh, it went the wrong way there. Yeah, I have my original Ludwig 1968 drum. Cool. Still. Okay. How did you break into show business?
Well, I guess it depends on how you define show business. So I wanted to be an actor from a young age. Went to NYU to study acting. While at NYU in my freshman year, I co-founded a sketch comedy group, which you mentioned, The State. We ended up with our own show on MTV, essentially right after we graduated from college. I didn't graduate, I dropped out, but the other guys graduated from college. And I guess that's how I broke into show business. There were some other little jobs sort of in between those events, but that was my big break, I guess.
Cool. Okay. All right. Now we're going to get into the heart of our conversation. You wrote a piece. It's online called My UFO, which I loved. And you say in that piece, you say toward the end of your senior year of high school, You and two friends saw a bright red and orange luminous fireball about 100 feet above a tree line. You said it was slow moving, made no sounds. And the interesting thing is you and your friends never discussed this, right? Until just recently when you sort of recalled it. Tell me about that, because I have a similar thing. I forgot about a sighting for 47 years. But tell me about this sighting.
I never forgot the sighting. Like it was sort of with me continuously from the moment it happened. But there were, I think, sort of two interesting things about it. The first is, I mean, just having a sighting is not uncommon, but unusual. But what was more interesting to me about it was our reactions to it. Like you just said, I was with two other people in the car. We never talked about it. The night I got home from that trip, we were at the movies driving home when I saw it. I went to sleep, woke up the next day, and immediately checked the newspaper, which was the Courier News for New Jerseyans, to see if a small plane had crashed, because I thought that was the only sort of possible explanation. And there was nothing in the newspaper. So years later, I was talking about this with my kids, and I said to them, I bet you, if I get in touch with my ex-girlfriend, who I was still in sort of infrequent communication with, she will have no memory of this event. And that's exactly what happened. I texted her, I described it. I said, this is what I remember. Do you have any memory of this? She said, I have no memory of this. And I know I would remember if I had seen something like that. So that was really interesting to me, because it suggested one of two things. Either I have a false memory for some reason, and kind of two false memories, because there was the sighting and then there was the checking the newspaper, or there's a kind of emotional dampening situation going on, which is a fairly common phenomena, as you know, in the UFO world. And I don't know which it is, but to me, that's more interesting than the actual sighting.
When you were in the car with your friends at the moment it was happening, were you all, oh, cool, look, oh, cool? Like, did they acknowledge it in the moment?
In my memory of it, we saw it, we talked about it. I remember saying we should try to follow it, because I thought, my God, there might be a plane crashing, and we should be of assistance if we can be. But there was no way to follow it, because we were driving on a narrow road in the woods. In New Jersey, where I was, it's fairly wooded, and it sort of just passed right above us, and there was just no way to keep up with it.
Okay, that's very interesting. All right, so speaking of New Jersey UFOs, right, the biggest story in the country, what do you think about these drones over New Jersey? And slash, if this was an Iranian mothership spitting out drones, don't you think we would know? Let's face it, we would know that, right?
Well, so I'm actually much more interested in your opinion about this than mine, because I know of your history with your father and his work on drones in New Jersey.
That's right, actually, that's true.
So I remember when you said that you had your first UFO encounter, you saw a giant UFO, you were with your dad, it hovered briefly, it darted away, you were freaked out, your dad turned to you and winked. And from that, you sort of surmised that your father, years later, you surmised that your father knew what the craft was and had possibly or probably worked on that craft or similar. So now we're 50 plus years later, we're still in New Jersey, we're still seeing mysterious craft. My question to you is, what is your interpretation of what we're seeing? Because the Pentagon apparently is now saying, well, they're not ours and they're not anybody else's. We don't know what the hell they are. But my suspicion is that they're lying and that they know exactly what they are, and that they're probably ours in some capacity, but I can't figure out why or what the deal is.
That's a great question. So yeah, I saw a giant V, silver V. It was huge with my dad. I was 13, and I'm jumping up and down. Dad, it's a UFO, like you said. And he looked at it, Michael, like he was bored, which was the oddest thing, man. Just like like if you or I were there, right, we would be dancing a horror. We'd be making love on the street, it'd be singing. breaking pinatas, right? My father was like, da, 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 I should get my car washed. Nothing, absolutely nothing. After he died, 47 years later, after he died, I had a vision, and I think extraterrestrials or my father from heaven sent that movie to me of the 1970 sighting, and it played in a deli. I was waiting for my pastrami sandwich, and it played. And I'm like 47 years later. And when I saw my dad winked at me in this replay, let's call it, I knew, man, I knew instinctively he knew what that thing was. I since, after he died, researched him. He worked at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. Fort Monmouth is a major electronics base, electronics and new technologies for the Army. They invented thousands of pieces of technical equipment, thousands at Fort Monmouth from the 40s through the 90s. My dad was there for 45 years. So, and I do remember, Michael, when I was a little kid, one of the few things he ever said to me, he goes, Danny, I invented drones. And I'm like, that's cool, Dad. Can we get ice cream? I mean, what am I going to do with, I don't know what that means. I'm probably 8, right? What am I going to do with that? My gut, Michael, is that these are extraterrestrial craft that are sort of screwing with us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think these are hobbyists. I don't think this is Iran. If this was Iran, Biden would have shot these guys down, man. These things are toying with us. I think my gut feeling is that they're extraterrestrial, and they're saying, "Hey, we're still here. Donald Trump's coming. We think Trump's going to be your disclosure president. Don't forget us. We're still here." Did you see there was something in Oregon today as well? There was a UFO sighting, major UFO sighting in Oregon as well. They're happening more and more frequently now.
There seem to be, yeah. I'm just looking up major Oregon UFO sighting today.
I believe it was yesterday or today.
Alleged UFO over Oregon caused pilots to divert 8 hours ago. More pilots saw strange lights in the sky.
In Oregon.
Believes they were likely Starlink satellites. All right, possibly, but possibly not.
I don't think.
I suspect pilots know what Starlink looks like at this point.
Right, and I don't think Elon Musk is going to put his Starlink to interfere with an airplane, right? I think the $400 billion genius, that'd be pretty schmucky to put them in the path of a plane. I personally, listen, like you. I want to know that we know that they're here. We've known that they're here since 1930s. There are documents that FDR had in the 30s about UFOs. I just want to live to see disclosure happen officially. I think I'd like to think they're extraterrestrial. To be honest, I was just watching CNN. They said some of these drones are 6 feet long. Think about that, 6 feet long, or the size of an SUV. That's not a hobbyist. That's not a kid from Radio Shack, as someone said on TV. And if that was Iran, don't you think Biden would be Iran's, effing with us, and we're going to do something? I think they would.
Well, why do you say Iran in particular as opposed to China or Russia or whomever?
It's been reported 2 days ago. The Pentagon said there was a rumor that it was a mothership, an Iranian mothership off the coast that was releasing little baby drones. Now,
I mean, can Iran even really field a proper air force?
How is this an Iranian mothership? In 2024, with our technology, we didn't know what it was. Now we know what
it does. None of the story as a whole does not make any sense to me. I can't think of any plausible, certainly not a prosaic explanation. But I mean, I guess the most likely explanation in my mind, sort of setting aside the ET hypothesis, is that for whatever reason, the US is testing these autonomous vehicles for some reason and then denying that they're doing it. I don't understand it. I really don't.
I've got an idea, Michael. I want to jump in here and give you guys something to chew on, if I may.
Go ahead.
Please.
Thank you, Dan. Doge is coming. This, you're right. Okay. And there's going to be, departments chopped, and there's going to be money cut and funds cut and that kind of thing. If you've got a need to be there, it's time to show it. It's time to show it now. Because look, I know 20 years ago from firsthand experience that MIT was recruiting high school kids in robotic programs. Two kids that went to school with my nephew that were in a robotic program in high school from MIT were recruited by them with a $60 million grant to create dragonfly drones and mosquito sized drones from talented kids that at the high school level. It's not going to take an F-16 or a chopper to bring down a drone. It's going to take drones that are going to go get drones, and we've got them. We've got dynamic technology. So I just think that with Trump coming, a new administration coming, and with these guys swinging axes on departments out front with the lawn chipper, wood chipper, that it would be a good way for people to show a necessity for their agencies being funded and continuing on. That's a thought.
I think it's a great thought with two possible caveats. First, the idea that Trump is going to cut the military and military spending seems far-fetched to me. It seems like the military in particular is probably out of bounds. He was the one in his last administration who was requesting more money for the Pentagon than even the Pentagon wanted. So it seems unlikely to me that they're doing it out of concern for budget cuts, although it's possible. The other thing that throws a little bit of a monkey wrench into those works, and I could have the dates wrong, but weren't we seeing similar activity in the UK pre-election?
Drones in
That's
the
true.
UK?
That is true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And they even had drones, filmed very good footage, like at an airport, like really good footage, clear footage.
Wasn't China also dealing with this at one point?
China, that I'm not so certain about.
I feel like they were like over an airport or something, but I could have that wrong.
There was recently a lot of drone footage or flying over one of the major U.S. military bases.
Yeah.
Was it Vandenberg? I don't remember which one, but there was a lot of concern. On TV tonight, they were saying, it could be an advertising stunt. Well, that's a pretty outrageous, Steven Spielberg. Okay, well, Spielberg's doing a new UFO movie, by the way. Could you imagine if he pulled off drones and got the whole country UFO, and then his movie came out? I mean, that would be a brilliant marketing move. It would be. It
would be. I mean, I can't imagine.
I think gets arrested for scary
cost or national security implications of doing something like that.
I know, it's incredible. All right, I want to move ahead. You said in one of your recent interviews you really became passionate about the UFO stories in late 2017, based on the New York Times front page article by Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean. What was it about that article that really affected you, do you think?
So I'd been interested in the topic my whole life, even before I had the sighting myself. But I guess I sort of felt like without forward progress, and I wasn't seeing any from the sidelines from where I was. The topic just felt a little bit dead to me. I didn't know how we were ever going to make any progress. When the story came out, and the Pentagon itself, which for decades, as everybody knows, had been denying that there's anything to this, now suddenly says, oh, yeah, actually, there are these things out there, and we have no idea what they are, and here's some video, and there's been a cover-up, and Harry Reid approved $22 million or whatever it was, that this is a real phenomena. It's a significant phenomena. The Pentagon has been studying this phenomena. In the article, they were just saying since whatever ATIP. Is that what it was? I guess it was ATIP or OSAP. And then, I guess part of me is enough of an institutionalist that I needed a kind of permission structure to dive back into the topic. I needed some sort of legitimization. And so since that happened, I've gone as far down the rabbit hole as more than most people And probably,
Right.
I'm certainly not as far as you or others in the field, but I've gone pretty far down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. See, again, I had a sighting in 1970. I forgot all about it till 2017. But here separately, completely independently, in 2007, I was waiting for a friend to go see a movie, and I was in a bookstore next to the movie theater waiting for my friend, and I saw, Michael, a paranormal books aisle, right? And I'm like, paranormal books, right? What the hell's it? And it's, it's Eric Von Daniken, it's Zechariah Sitchin, it's Betty and Barney Hill, it's Crop Circles, it's Roswell, it's Travis Walt. And I'm like, whoa. And I just had like a light bulb went off my head. Dan, buy me. I bought like, I don't know, 20 books. I just
Wow.
bought a ton and I read them. And I'm like, wow. Now, I didn't remember the sighting I had as a child, but I was called to buy these books. And in the books, I learned about MUFON, which I'd never known. I didn't know what MUFON was. I read about it. I looked it up. There's a Southern California chapter in LA of MUFON. I joined in 07. So from 07 till today, I've been deeply entrenched in this. But it was in 2017 that I had my recall of my first experience. So anyway, I'm all over the place.
Now, just out of curiosity, was the recall of your sighting, did that predate the Times article or postdate it?
The New York Times article?
Mhm.
Oh, wow, that's such a great question. My
The
dad
Times
died.
article was October, I want to say?
I think it was December.
December.
You know what's funny, Michael?
It almost predated it.
It was the same year. My dad died in April 2017. 3 days later, I went to get a pastrami sandwich, and I had a download of the event. I saw it was a hologram. I saw it. It played for me. April 2017. New York Times article was December 2017. My daughter seems to think that whatever is out there in, perhaps influencing me a little bit, it was like, Dan, you're kind of one of us, you've seen us, you've had experiences, maybe, and then I met Steve Bassett and we created the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, and I wrote my book called After They Came. All these things, Michael, it's just really just one door led to the next, very linear. I didn't even try at all. These things just happened. I became the publicist for Contact in the Desert. All these things just lined up. So like you, I think you and I both had we have a calling for whatever reason. We have a calling, and this subject fascinates both of us.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me about it is how passionate people like you and I are, and how how obvious it is to people like you and I that not only is this an important story, it is potentially the most important story in the history of humanity. And without being hyperbolic beyond, I mean, to me, saying it's the most important story in the history of humanity isn't the hyperbolic part. That to me is just obvious.
That's a statement. That's a statement of fact. Yeah, that's a statement of fact.
The hyperbolic part would be to suggest that the story itself is indicative of something much, much grander than humanity itself, and indicative of a, let's say, to keep it simple, some sort of galactic story of which we are only a tiny part. So that is where my head just naturally goes. And then there's people like my wife who couldn't give a shit, and that to me is perplexing. And my wife, I think, is representative of 98% of the population who, for whatever reason, don't have that, is a calling? I don't know what it is, a fascination, obsession with humanity's place in the universe, which to me, as a human, the human DNA, it seems to me like we're, for lack of a better word, programmed to explore ourselves and to understand who we are in relationship to the rest of the world, capital W, world. So when people aren't interested in this topic, I find it mystifying because it speaks to something so deep in me that I assume every person has it, but they don't seem to. And I don't understand why.
That's so true. My mother just turned 90 a few weeks ago, right, Michael? My mother turned 90, God bless her, little Brooklyn Jewish lady. Danny, it's enough already with the aliens. That's every time. Ma, I had a sighting. I wrote a book. I met Nick Pope. Danny, it's enough with the aliens. I mean, that's right. It says it all.
Yeah, no, that's my wife too.
Yeah, show me an alien. Otherwise, go make me a cup of coffee and go away.
Right.
Last year, you said David Grush, and I agree with you. You said David Grush was your hero, and I agree with you. But why was David Grush a hero to you?
Because it seemed like he was a kind of black swan event. And I could be wrong about that. It could be that there was more sort of going on backstage that I'm unaware of. But it seemed to me, and continues to seem to me, that Grush was out there doing the job assigned to him, was getting nowhere, found himself frustrated to the point of deciding to essentially throw his entire career away, military career away, for the purpose of whistleblowing and informing the American and global public about what he discovered. That takes a tremendous act of courage.
Chutzpah. The word is chutzpah.
Perfect word for it.
Yeah.
Not only was he taking a financial hit, he was endangering himself physically, if he is to be believed, and I do believe him. And he was throwing away. He was throwing away a huge part of his life, his network, his community, his friends, for the purpose of sharing with the public things that he felt they profoundly needed to know. To me, that's a heroic action, no less than, say, Deep Throat during Watergate, or any other truth teller who comes forward knowing the risks involved.
Are you aware of the two Stevens in Washington, D.C.? The two Stevens, Stephen Bassett and Stephen Greer. You know who both of those guys are. They, independently, they're friends, but they don't work in tandem. Steve Bassett's like one of my best friends. They, for 30 years, have been presenting UFO, not really whistleblowers, let's say experiencers and researchers, for 30 years at the Washington Press Club, right? In Washington, D.C. They always have press there. They always get some coverage. But, to piggyback on the Grush, but when Grush came out, at least his was in the LA Times. It was page 19, Michael. I remember the next day. I'm like, we have extraterrestrial biologics and craft and technology. We've been reverse engineering, and extraterrestrials exist. Okay, I get the LA Times the next day.
Funny pages. Next
day, LA Times, page 19. This guy, Air Force guy, says, there's extraterrestrials. And in other news, how is this not the banner of every paper in the world? I don't understand. It makes me crazy. Same with you, right? Makes you crazy.
Makes me crazy. I don't understand. I mean, I remember exactly where I was when I read the story when it first came out. And I thought to myself, this, I think, changes things. It definitely moves the ball forward. And it has, not to the extent that I want, or maybe you want, but the conversation is ongoing and it's potent and it seems to be gaining momentum.
I mean, even when someone like Nancy Mace in Congress, and Jamie Raskin, couldn't be two more ideologically different people, but they're both asking really, really good questions. Do we have extraterrestrials? Are there the bodies? Do we have the science? Do we have the tech? So this is one of the few, if maybe the only, nonpartisan issue, and like you said, this is the biggest story. If they reveal themselves, if and when they do, and they say, "Listen, we don't want to upset you, but Moses was one of our prophets. Jesus was one of our prophets. Muhammad, Buddha. We created do you know about this one? I've read it recently." That Hebrew was the language extraterrestrials spoke Hebrew. Wouldn't that?
Well, I mean, what's funny about that?
Isn't that great?
It's fascinating, but it's also, I mean, all those sort of symbols that you sometimes see, they vaguely resemble Hebrew.
Well, Moses parts the Red Sea. Manna from heaven. You know about manna from heaven? Manna from heaven. Something in the sky fed the Israelites from the sky for 40 years. The desert doesn't have food or water. Manna from heaven. Okay, so even if it was God, but God had to do it mechanically somehow, right? In the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, there's a passage that says there was a pillar of cloud that followed the Israelites through the desert by day, and a pillar of fire followed them at night so that they could see where they were going for 40 years. Now, a pillar could also be a column. It could also be a cigar-shaped UFO. This is in the Hebrew Bible. Moses gets the 10 Commandments. He comes down Mount Sinai. He was glowing. Apparently, Moses was glowing. Why? He was on a craft. I forget how many days he was gone. He speaks to the burning bush, but the bush was not consumed by the fire. That was a craft. So much. I mean, when they say, "Hey, look, we created you humans. We created your religions. Here's all the answers." People's heads are like, my mother's head will explode. She'll just explode right off the bat, right? And then all these people are going to go, "Jesus was an extraterrestrial." It's so huge. I don't know.
Well,
it's nice.
I don't know that I can go with you to the point of Jesus was an extraterrestrial.
No, he was a hybrid. I believe he was okay. All right, hold on. How about that?
Hybrid, I'll go with you to hybrid.
Okay, hybrid. Yeah, for sure. Wait, hold on. Mary was human. His mother was human. Okay, right.
Yeah, makes sense.
His father was God. Now, God, by definition, is an extraterrestrial. God doesn't walk on the sidewalk and go to Walmart. God is it. So, by definition, according to those who described him, he was a hybrid. And now my ex-wife and my daughter are super Christian, and they're like, "Dad, you're insane." They yell at me, "Dad, you're insane." He's not a hybrid. Of course he was. He was. That's like a walk on water, right? Fishes and loaves. Did you see that show, The Chosen, by the way? Oh, is that good, Michael? There's a 4 seasons show. It's called The Chosen. It's the history of Jesus. Very well researched. The actor looks the acting, every episode makes you cry. It's so well done. You should look into that.
It's about the apostles. It's a story of the apostles while they were selected, their stories, and that kind of thing.
Cool.
And it's all crowdfunded. You're right, Dan. It was impressive.
It's a global phenomenon. Yeah, it's called The Chosen.
The Chosen. All right.
Yeah, four seasons.
I'm opening a window so I don't forget.
It's just excellent. Really lovely. Okay,
I've never even heard of it. But I'll definitely watch it. Yeah, it's interesting to me how the UFO component of the larger phenomena has become to me the least interesting aspect of all of this. The kind of nuts and bolts craft that exist in some form or not, or plasma, or whatever the hell these things are, is far less interesting to me than the associated experiences that people have. For example, a hologram being projected from your eyes, where it's recounting for you essentially a home movie of an extraordinary experience you had. Your dead father communicating with you vocally is to me, I don't know if it's directly related to your sighting, but it's certainly adjacent. The idea of, I don't know if you've been listening to this podcast, The Telepathy Tapes, which is maybe the most extraordinary thing I've ever heard, which does a deep dive into a phenomenon among minimally verbal or nonverbal autistic people who apparently can communicate telepathically.
Wow.
Not only with each other, with family members, they can, they have a sort of virtual realm where they meet called the Hill, where they all sort of telepathically transport themselves and have hangouts. Basically, it's like a chat room. Now, I can't I can't speak to the validity of this podcast, but I will say that as somebody who is skeptically inclined, but at the same time, also I fear somewhat gullible, I found it, and continue to find it, incredibly compelling. The series is ongoing. Near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, tales of levitation, sightings at like Fatma and whatever. All of this feels related. All of this feels like it's of a piece, and I don't, for the life of me, have any idea what any of it is.
Well, my dad came to me several times. My dead grandfather came to me 50 years after he died. If
What
we
was
go,
that experience?
he was a poltergeist. I moved into an apartment in Beverly Hills with a girlfriend in 2003, and things were flying around, things were breaking, things were
Wait, what do you
moving.
mean things were flying around? You were witnessing things moving across space?
Okay, let's see. I'll give you a couple of things. One night we were sleeping and we heard a very loud crash in our bathroom, and we got up. A tall drinking glass of water had been lifted and smashed to the ground hard in a million pieces. And no, there was no earthquake or wind or anything. My son was in his room visiting me. I had my kids on the weekends, and he's screaming, "Dad, there's someone in my room." Dad, screaming. There's someone. He's 14. Someone in my room. I go in his room. He's shaking like this. He said, "Dad, someone was knocking on my walls and the TV all around, 360, all around." He went back to bed. The next morning, we were making breakfast. He was in bed with the door open. His door slammed closed really hard. And he goes, "Dad, someone just slammed the door." One other thing, this is a funny story. This apartment had a fireplace. You know those long decorative candles, and they come in a container?
Mhm.
I was going to make a fire. I just moved in with this girlfriend. I was going to make a fire, a long thing. I opened the end, and instead of like a schmuck, like a normal person would get 1 or 2 matches out of here, I grabbed 50 matches. Like I grabbed literally all 50. I pulled all 50. I pulled them out so fast they lit. So I'm holding a torch. I swear, I'm holding a torch. There's a fire in my hand, like, and I'm thinking, well, there goes my nose, my eyebrows, and my eyelashes. So I'm staring at it. I'm like, what a schmuck. What did I just do? And I swear to God on my daughter, a dark black and blue mist came flying through the air, through the dining room, flew into the living room where I was. I saw it coming, this blob. It was a blob. It was coming. It grabbed this torch, I swear, out of my hand, and it threw the torch into the fireplace. And then the blob went into the wall. It went into the wall. So I'm like, what the hell was that? Because I didn't do it. I felt it pull it out of my hand.
Mhm.
We did a Ouija board. Long story short, I said, "Is there a ghost in this house?" "Yes." "What's your name?" "Joseph." "Where are you from?" "Syria." Now, Michael, I started crying. I go, "Are you my grandpa Joe?" "Yes." My grandpa Joe was from Syria. And then I said, "Why are you here?" And he wrote, "Jordan." My son was sitting there. "Jordan." "What do you want with Jordan?" "To teach." "To teach." And then I said, "How long have you been here?" And then he wrote in Hebrew. My grandfather was an Orthodox cantor. He wrote in Hebrew, "I am a stranger here." Then I said, "Grandpa Joe, I love you. I miss you, but you got to leave." I said, "You're literally scaring the shit out of my family. I need you to leave." And it went, "Okay." Have you ever done a Ouija board?
When I was a kid, yeah.
Okay. It went, oh, I said, "You need to leave." "Okay." And then that was it. All the activity stopped, and I lived there another year. Nothing ever happened. So this is my dead grandfather. But I think that what these things have in common, and I think some extraterrestrials, interdimensional. I interviewed Avi Loeb earlier this year. He says that interdimensional beings are quite possible. So wouldn't that? I mean, some extraterrestrials, some ghosts, poltergeists. These are things that aren't in our everyday lives. I think interdimensional is a big theory. What do you think about that?
Well, in paranormal circles, in channeling circles, in near-death experiences, a lot of people talk about the veil. And when they talk about, quote unquote, the other side, they refer to it as being right here among us, with us. And the only way that that I can conceptualize that idea is that of another dimension. We know mathematically it's certainly possible to have higher dimensions and as many dimensions as you like to have. We also know that our senses are extremely limited. We know our eyesight is extremely limited. We know our hearing is extremely limited. We know animals that have more profound senses of smell, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no reason to believe scientifically that what we're interpreting as the world is the world. There's no reason to believe that. Instead, what it seems to be is we're experiencing more or less the projection of a world, or the assemblage of a world, so that we can operate within it, so that it makes sense to us, so that we can move through this space in ways that allows us to survive, thrive, and reproduce. So the idea that there may be some dimensions beyond ours, and that there are potentially intelligences that can kind of come in and out of it, only seems far-fetched because we don't have the physics or the math or anything to sort of understand how such a thing could happen. But conceptually, I see no problem with it.
What are your thoughts about ancient astronaut theory?
I mean, I guess I like anything else. The problem with this topic, as you know, is once you get into the rabbit hole, it goes so deep, and there's no way presently to discern what is factual and historical from what is not. But if we believe, and I do, that there is some sort of non-human intelligence present on this planet at this time, there's no reason to think that intelligence wouldn't have been present in other times. And as we've already talked about with Moses and other prophets, it casts religion and spiritual teachings in an entirely different light if we open ourselves to the possibility that these religious texts are in some ways literal. Now, there's obviously been fundamentalists who have believed that from the very beginning. And as a sort of non-religious Jew myself, I was always like, no, there was no burning bush. Nobody parted the Red Seas. None of these quote unquote miracles could have happened. But once you descend into the rabbit hole, I wouldn't say it all becomes probable, but it all certainly becomes possible. And so maybe one of the reasons people are not attracted to this topic is because if you allow the possibility of this to exist, you then have to allow the possibilities of all kinds of other things to exist. And if that's the case, the world as you know it is a lie. And you then need to start reconceptualizing everything that you thought to be true. So it's much easier to say, yeah, show me an alien. Until then, make me a pot of coffee.
Right. It's enough with the aliens. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard this concept? If you read the Bible, of course, there's, thousands of references to angels. Yeah. I'm sure. Old and New Testament, angels. If you change the word angels with extraterrestrials, just change the word. Now, angels by definition would be extraterrestrial. They're not human. They're not. So if you change angels to extraterrestrials, you go, wow, there's a lot of activity interacting with humans. I agree with you. I think the Bible was literal. I think that our ancestors who wrote the Bibles were trying their best to explain miracles with simple words. There was no words for technology or airships or planes or anything. And, a burning bush. I mean, they used the best words that they could. Do you watch the Ancient Aliens TV show?
No.
Have you ever seen it?
No.
I'm very surprised.
I have a kind of allergy to television shows about aliens, because they tend to be, in my estimation, sensational to the point of unhelpful. And because I know how the TV machine works, I know that, you just need to keep generating content and material, and you need to make it compelling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, I never bother with any of that shit. Like I'm much more interested in going into source material, eyewitness accounts, books, having conversations with experiencers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Speaking of books, did you ever read Chariots of the Gods? Eric von
No, I
Däniken?
never read Chariots of the God, and I should. My
Okay,
mom had it, I feel like.
So that book was a phenomenon. I believe it came out in 1970. That book inspired Giorgio Tsoukalos to create Ancient Aliens, the TV show, because Giorgio is Eric von Däniken's mentee.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So the Ancient Aliens TV show is essentially built upon Eric von Däniken's Ancient Alien theory. And so if you watch the earlier, you know what? Watch a few episodes, Michael, because a lot of it it will make you make your mind go crazy. But some of it's crappy. Some of the praying mantis and the ones that look like insects. I don't know about those, but there are episodes you go, yeah, like the Easter Island statues, Stonehenge, right? Crop circles. There's a lot that could be extraterrestrial. Race, do you have something?
One thing you're talking about, let's say our forefathers, the ancients, those that have walked before us. When the one thing that really scrambles my brain is the flower of life, the ancient Sumerians,
I don't know what that is.
The 64 eccentric circles, and it's found on every continent on the planet. And it, from the farthest reaches back that we can go, it was over in Syria back when ISIS was destroying all of those temples and statues. And I mean, that's some of the oldest artwork, etched artwork on Earth. But there are these round globes. You can see them in a lot of images, maybe before that can call to mind now, where like a lion's paw is on a ball, and it's on the ball, looks like it's almost like a floral print, but it's 64 circles that are all interlinked together. And the math behind it just breaks my brain to try to understand it. But if you ever get the chance, Mike, and Dan as well, look at the flower of life. You want to go back and see just how intelligent, how smart, how much credit right there in that one thing is where we can really give the kind of credit to those who recorded these things. And another thing, interestingly, in the Chosen that we spoke about earlier, it specifically is about the apostles, their stories. And those men were the men who carried Jesus Christ's stories, his miracles, his works, his passion into the future after he was gone. And all of those guys met horrific deaths because of it. All they had to do was renounce that everything they were saying was a lie, and not one of them ever did.
Right. So there's
and that kind of goes with the industry. I don't want to say that, but Travis Walton, 7 guys, 7 woodpicker rednecks, whatever you want to call them, are out there sawing down trees. Half of them didn't get along, half of them hated each other, and all these years they've maintained the same story. And there's just a lot to be said about a group of people that will ride with something to the very end, regardless of all the money that's been thrown at them to say differently, or being crucified upside down and then sawed in half. It's
the Zimbabwe school children, same thing.
Very good point, Michael. Yeah. I just wanted to jump in and say that.
Yeah, it is fascinating to me, as a contemporary person living in 2024, whatever year. I almost said 2025. I have a hard time keeping track of what year it is. When you get to a certain age, you don't know what year it is. But my tendency as somebody growing up in this civilization, and with the education that I had, the secular education that I had, my tendencies were to disbelieve all quote unquote irrational experiences. I no longer feel that way. And I'm incredibly drawn to people like the apostles or Buddha or his followers, or Muhammad, anybody, even Joseph Smith, who I always thought, well, that guy's just a grifter and a con man.
Yeah.
Maybe, but at the same time, it's getting harder and harder. No, I'll say it's impossible for me to now discount extraordinary claims. So, for example, Dan, you just told me about an extraordinary claim. A blob came through a wall, grabbed a torch from your hand, threw it in the fireplace.
It was my dead grandfather. Yeah.
Your dead grandfather. So, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have said, "No, that's nice, Dan," and continued on about my day. I now totally take you at your word. I believe these things happen. It's not something I talk about, but I've had an experience of my own that I can sort of explain, but mostly not. And it profoundly changed me. I don't know what to do with it. I mean, I do know what to do with it, and I'm doing it. I'm having a conversation with you, and I'm writing about things, and I'm talking about things. And this just happened a year and change ago. This is long after my sighting, and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, you've become a pretty prominent disclosure advocate in a short period of time. Before we run out of time, I want to ask you this. As you know, last year, Steve Bassett and I co-created the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. It was my idea, and we joined forces, he and I. The HDA brings together UFO and ET researchers, experts, and experiencers with entertainment industry writers, producers, directors, and performers. And my goal with HDA is to help nurture the next generation of films and TV shows based on the real life experiences of real life people. So, Michael, what do you think Hollywood's role should be in regard to the disclosure movement?
When you initially approached me, or when I was initially approached to join this alliance, I definitely had that question in my mind, because there's two sort of competing things at play for me when we talk about the entertainment industry and disclosure. On the one hand, you have the most talented storytellers on earth operating in that industry.
Right.
And operating at a very high level, which I don't think most people fully appreciate or understand. There's a very high level of work that goes on to create the sort of products that we enjoy and consume. That being said, there is also the notion that people in Hollywood or in this industry are superficial, flighty, prone to bouts of fantasy and illusion, and are incapable of distinguishing truth from lie or from story, because it's just the sort of make-believe world that we live in. And so I think it's a fine line that the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance has to walk, because yes, we are storytellers. That is what we do, and we do it better than anybody. On the other hand, for us to present those stories in a way that furthers disclosure is a tricky business, because these stories have to be entertaining, obviously, informative, and rooted in something tangible.
Yeah.
So to me, the best example of this is probably Close Encounters of the Third Kind, although I had no idea of that at the time, nor did I think anybody.
J. Allen Hynek was Spielberg's consultant. You know that.
I do know that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I obviously didn't know that when I was a kid. I don't think I only learned that in the past
I've seen
few
that
years.
movie probably, 60 times at least. That movie deeply affected me. I cry every time when I see that movie.
It's a deeply affecting movie, because I think what makes it so powerful is although it's Spielbergian in all of its kind of glory and magnificence,
Yeah,
whether you
absolutely.
like that or not, and at times I like it, and at times I don't.
Right.
There is also the phenomenological component of it. There's the telepathy component, which in 1970 whatever, when this film came out,
75.
that
75.
sounds right.
No. 77.
77.
Jaws was 75. 77.
Okay. There's aspects of that film that seem very contemporary, in the way that it links these disparate phenomenological points and creates a kind of cohesive whole out of them. That to me is super compelling.
Well, I think we have to wrap, but I think what you said just now about HDA, Michael, in a sense, these stories have to be vetted in some way, right? I mean, if my neighbor knocked on my door and said, Dan, I just met Bigfoot. Oh, okay. How do I know that? Right.
Mhm.
But there are credible, and I like to consider myself, and I know probably hundreds of people now that have had incredible ET experience. Do you know Thomas Jane, the movie star?
I've
Thomas
never
Jane?
met him, but I know who he is.
He had an experience in his home, that he was so terrified of. To this day, he said, I can't talk about it. He told me I can't talk about it. It was something came into his home and something happened to him in his home. So there are real stories out there. They need to be vetted, I guess, somehow, so that they're credible. Anyway, can we do maybe a part 2 in the spring? I'd love to talk to you more. We're going to run out of time.
I'm always happy to talk about this shit because
Yeah.
nobody in my house will. So
I know. Me too. I don't even care that other people are watching this. Right? I've wanted to talk to you for like a year. I hope you feel better. Congratulations on Have I Got News for You, season 2, February 15th. February 15th.
Yeah, it airs February 15th. Yeah.
Second great season. Show. It's very funny. Watch it on CNN Saturday nights. Feel better. Maybe like February, March, April, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Give me a holler. I'm around.
I really would like to do it again.
Sure.
I have a million questions we didn't even get to. Thank you for being here on my Dopey Show. Thank you, everybody, for watching live from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight. And watch Michael on CNN. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too.